Hello, I'm Abe Malley, and today I'm going to go over my Accounting 202 project, which goes over cost variances and efficiency variances from Chapter 23. My project uses video game characters and assets from the game Half-Life 2 to help simulate differences in cost variances and efficiency variances. Let's check it out. So here you can see the title screen to my game, The Journalizer 2, Efficiency Varied. It's not really a whole lot to do here, so we'll just go ahead and start a new game. Alright, now that the game is loaded, I'll show you around. The setting for my game puts you in the shoes of a tire shop owner somewhere in Florida, and you'll see that the shop is a little bit strange. For one, we only work on these crappy red cars, and specifically, we only change the front passenger tire of the car. That's it, just the front passenger tire. And unfortunately for our employees, the other car jack is broken, so there's just the one car jack. Alright, now that I've shown you the shop, let's take a look at some of the day-to-day activities that we have to do as the owner. Here are some of the resumes that have been submitted for positions in the shop. This seems to be the most professional of the bunch. Then we got David Essex, the least professional. And Average, which has the least experience but seems to have a good work ethic. And over here we have the different types of tires that the shop can buy. These are the standard tires. These are the most expensive but least likely to fail tires. And these are the cheapest wholesale tires you can get, which are the cheapest but also the worst quality. Let's go ahead and hire the standard worker and see how this plays out. Oh, there's our worker ready to go. So working at the tire shop is pretty simple. You bring the car up, you take the tire off, you walk the tire nice and slow down to the dumpster, and you toss the tire into the dumpster, and you walk over to the pallet of tires, pick one up, slowly walk it back to the car, and install. And once the tire is installed to the car, you lower it down on the lift, and it's on its way. Job well done. So now we know the basics. Let's do a quick look at some of the other workers that we might hire. Here's the cheapest of the bunch. He's the cheapest laborer, but also the most likely to make mistakes. And on the flip side, we have Robert Scott, who is the most expensive, but also the least likely to make mistakes. In addition to being the least likely to make mistakes, he's also the fastest out of the three to install tires. The cheapest worker never runs, the average worker only runs when a tire fails, and the most expensive worker runs when installing a tire and when one fails. We'll see what effect their work ethic has when we do our cost variance analysis at the end. One final note is that we're able to speed up time in the game in order not to watch these guys work in real time. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get into the accounting side of things. This is the scoreboard after the shop ran with a standard worker and standard tires. We're going to use this information as the baseline to many of our accounting formulas. After running all the various workers with all the different tires, here's the results we gathered. Okay, so to reiterate, the average 7-hour workday takes 387 jobs. So all of our workers have been based on that 387 job mark in order to complete their workday. Alright, moving on to the direct materials cost variance, which is the difference between the amount actually paid for direct materials and what it should have been paid. So we found the standard cost based on the average of all the costs of our tires in this setting. The standard quantity is based on the amount of tires it takes to complete the job for the day, and the actual quantity is the number of tires it actually took to complete the 387 jobs for the day. For this equation, it's the actual cost of the tires subtracted from the standard cost times the actual quantity of tires. And with this, we find that standard tires have a $1,700 favorable outcome, Bad tires have a $25,000 favorable outcome, and excellent tires have a $9,000 unfavorable outcome. This brings us to our total direct materials variance, which is based on the direct materials cost variance added to the direct materials efficiency variance, which for standard tires is $2,000 favorable, bad tires is almost $2,000 favorable, and excellent tires is $6,000 unfavorable. Next, we have the direct labor cost variance, which is the difference between the actual amount paid for direct labor and the amount that should have been paid for direct labor. So here we have the standard cost of direct labor, which is based on the average of all of our employees' wages, the actual cost, which is what they made, and the standard quantity, which is the average 7-hour workday, and the actual quantity, which is the time it took to actually complete the 387 jobs for that day. So this worker only made 10 cents less than the average worker, so his variances are all pretty marginal, but favorable. That leads us to the direct labor efficiency variance, which is the difference between the actual labor hours and the labor hours that should have been used. So this shows how efficient the worker was with their hours. Here we see that standard tires had a small $3.65 favorable outcome, bad tires had a $65 unfavorable outcome, and excellent tires had a $15 favorable outcome. Which brings us to the total direct labor variance, which is the direct labor cost variance added to the direct labor efficiency variance, which for standard tires brings us to a $4 favorable outcome, bad tires is a $65 unfavorable outcome, and excellent tires is a $15 favorable outcome. So rather than going through each and every one of these reports, I'd like to just go over some of the results that I found interesting. For example, the excellent worker actually performed worse than our bad worker, which I found very surprising. I thought for sure that the excellent worker, even though he was making $20 an hour, would easily outperform the bad worker. However, when it comes down to the dollars, the bad worker has a $1,700 favorable outcome on standard tires, a $2,700 favorable on bad tires, and a $6,000 unfavorable on excellent tires, which when compared to the excellent worker, he has only $1,600 favorable on standard tires, a $2,500 favorable on bad tires, and a $5,900 on unfavorable for excellent tires. So it only performs marginally better for excellent tires, which are unfavorable anyway. The other thing that the bad worker beats the excellent worker at is the total direct labor variance, which for standard tires, the excellent worker only gets $12.80 unfavorable, whereas the bad worker gets a $4.70 favorable, and the excellent worker has a 77 unfavorable on bad tires, and the bad worker only has a $47 unfavorable outcome for bad tires. I guess it shouldn't surprise me because the bad worker only makes $10 an hour, whereas the excellent worker makes twice that. However, I thought for sure with the number of mistakes the bad worker made, for example, he made over 2,000 mistakes on every work day, where the excellent worker only made 82 mistakes. It shows that the dollars made per hour ended up being the biggest factor in how the production of this tire shop worked. One other thing that surprised me from these results was that the bad tires ended up being favorable on every single total direct materials variance. This surprised me because even though they were terrible quality and failed almost 3 times as often as the standard and excellent tires, the bad tires still ended up being the most favorable outcome overall, unless you count the average worker. He's the only exception. Another thing to take into account is that this report is based on one workday, so these variances might differ with a complete month of work. This is purely only based on one workday for each worker. One more thing to note about my results is that I didn't take into account the total variable overhead cost, which I'm sure if we did those results, we would find that the excellent worker would outperform everyone else there, and the bad worker would show just how bad he is. Anyway, hope you found my project entertaining. Thanks for watching.